Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the North American Association of Cerebral Palsy Advocates Chatline. My name is Caleb Wells. I'm joined again by Tanner Lynn, our Vice President of the North American Association of Cerebral Palsy Advocates. We have a very special episode for you today. We're going to talk about CP as a whole, being that this is March, and we're recording here in the first week of March, which is World Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month. And I was realizing as we were going through and prepping for our next episode is that we've talked a lot about cerebral palsy and how it affects individuals and how to live with it, but we haven't really talked about the diagnosis itself. So I'm going to bring Tanner in here, let him kind of explain the diagnosis and what it is, and then we'll go into some facts and figures, and we'll continue to move on from there. So Tanner?
Okay, so CP has a wide variety of changes and functionality depending on the person. You can be diagnosed with CP and be able to walk, be able to talk, but some of us like me rely on a wheelchair every day to do things, and also some of us can do things more independently than others can. So CP really is a wide spectrum of a diagnosis. It basically just depends on the person. It's how it affects them. So
Yeah, and I think you hit on it very well. It is really a spectrum. Like most disabilities, it's a spectrum that we see. Usually people want to say, well, you know, you have CP, so you're in this box. Although it affects people in very many different ways. And that's kind of what we wanted to talk about, because there are different types of cerebral palsy. And I'm going to pull up a screen here from the CP, from CPARF, which is the Cerebral Palsy Alliance Research Foundation. And so there are 4 different locations in the body that it can affect you. It can affect all 4 limbs, which is quadriplegia, triplegia, which affects 3 limbs, typically 1 arm and both legs, but it can also affect a person's facial movements and oral muscles, as well as the limbs. You have diplasia, which is 1 area of the body, so either both legs or both arms, or you can have hemiplasia, which is 1 side of the body. There are 3 different types of cerebral palsy based on where the damage is in the brain, because cerebral palsy is a brain injury. So about 75% of people, as you can see on the screen, 70 to 80% of people are diagnosed with spastic cerebral palsy, which is the muscles appear tight and can affect motor skills because of the damage to the cerebral cortex, which is on the top of the brain, as you can see there. Tanner and I are both spastic quadriplegia, which means it affects all 4 of our limbs. And even though we have the exact same diagnosis, we deal with it in very different ways. I am still ambulatory, which means I can still walk with assistance, sometimes without assistance. It just depends. And then I use my wheelchair most of the time out in public. But Tanner is completely wheelchair bound.
I mean, I think the last time I was able to walk was 2010. So
So
That
it's
was,
been a minute.
yeah,
Um,
just a few.
so yeah, it's been just a few, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's the nice thing about the association as well, is we're not all spastic quads. We have all types and all functionality of cerebral palsy, and it really is a spectrum. So I know we talked about a couple weeks ago with Brittany about doctors treating the person and not necessarily the diagnosis, because there is kind of this, by the book way to treat a diagnosis. But if you're a good doctor, you're going to talk to the person and see how it truly affects them.
Yep.
There's dyskinetic cerebral palsy, which is damage usually on the left side of the brain, in the ganglia, um, balsamic ganglia damage there on the left side of the brain towards the brain stem. Most of the people who end up with that, it only occurs in 6% of cases, but mostly end up with diplasia uh, or hemiplasia on the left side. And then there's ataxic cerebral palsy, which affects just the back part of the cerebellum and then part of the brain stem. And most of these individuals end up with monoplasia, which would only affect one limb, or hemiplasia on either side of the body. So we wanted to kind of come on and just talk about what it is and how it happens. It usually happens due to a loss of oxygen uh, shortly before birth or shortly after birth. And so we have some other topics here as well. And we talk about 1 in 3 children born with cerebral palsy have mobility issues. Another 25% of children born with cerebral palsy deal with communication issues. And there are 24 children a day born with cerebral palsy here in the United States. So that's about 1 in every 323 births here in the United States. And despite the average lifespan of an individual with cerebral palsy being between 65 and 70 years old, there's not much research done in adult care of cerebral palsy. It's all, and Tanner, you would agree with this, it's mostly about early intervention.
It is.
And trying to help the children through pediatrics and getting them to 18 or 21, depending on when the cutoff is for a certain pediatric
Facility.
doctor's office. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, that was really clunky. I apologize for that. So we come in and we talk about these things, and it's not to scare people. 75% of us deal with pain on a daily basis. And I think we talk about that a lot, is we talk about pain management, and it's not just trying to dope people up. I know when we've talked about this before, it's where does the quality of life take a hit? If we're trying to just manage the pain and we're, shoving baclofen down people's backs and pills down people's throats, how does that affect the quality of life? And Tanner, you can kind of talk about that if you want to.
I mean, I think quality of life is a good thing, because you want to make sure that the person with CP has the ability to manage the pain that they may have with CP, because some days you're like, oh crap, I don't want to function today, but you have to get out of bed and do the things you need to get done for the day. But if we just are like constantly, if you go to the doctor and they're like, take medicine for this, take medicine for this. What does that do? What does that do to your system? I mean, for me, I don't take hardly anything. I don't even take Tylenol unless I have to. So, I feel pretty fortunate in that circumstance. I don't have to take much, and I also have a high pain tolerance, so I don't pain doesn't bother me that much, which is a good thing because I mean, if I was in pain all day, I'd be like, "Holy crap, I can't do this." No, and it's one of those things that you're just like, okay, move on with that with your day, because you don't want to be in pain all day, and it's just something that people with CP deal with, and each one of us deal with it differently.
And it's funny that you bring up pain tolerance because I feel like a lot of us have a higher pain tolerance than someone born without cerebral palsy.
Yeah.
But it also brings in another point where 25% of people born with cerebral palsy end up developing ADHD or another behavioral disorder. So, and it's very hard to manage those medications when you have other pain medications you have to work around because some of them don't react well. So when we go in and try to get management for our mental health, the pain management kind of takes precedent, and it's very scary to think about that way because we all want to be content and comfortable in our own skin, and sometimes that's hard to do when you have behavior issues that are being put to the back burner, for lack of a better analogy, because
Yes.
of your pain management.
Yeah.
And it's also hard when you talk about going to doctors, and there's a lot of times that doctors who don't know much about cerebral palsy will just chalk up your different symptoms to your cerebral palsy and say, well, I don't want to deal with that because it's probably a cerebral palsy related issue.
Which
And that leads to gaslighting. And you can go ahead there, Tanner.
which to me that should not be a thing. If it's if it's something that's not CP related, don't say, well, it could be related to CP, because that's not the answer.
Well,
And don't say I can't treat X patient because they have a disability. That doesn't work.
and it's hard, and you have to be very thorough when you do these things. And so I tend to think that as a medical community, when we talk about doctors and things like that, it's very hard to uh, get that training and that specialization with dealing with people with disabilities. And
Yes.
it's very hard to find a primary care doctor when you have cerebral palsy because they're going to look at your bones and your muscles, and they're like, oh yeah, you're stiff. Well, of course I'm stiff.
Yeah.
I was born with high extensor tone. Like that's just what happens.
Yep.
But I think that the mental health piece of this is important as well as we go through with Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month and just in general when we go through education, because that's what we want to be. We want to be an educational podcast. We want to be able to help people understand cerebral palsy, and then we want to especially help young people with cerebral palsy understand that there is life outside of a hospital as well. I think that's kind of one of our bigger goals is if we had the opportunity and the platform to do that, we should be able to do that.
And what I would say too is we want to show the younger people with CP that, hey, you can have CP and grow up and be successful. Like Caleb, you and I both have college background, and people often think, oh, my child or my brother with CP can't go to college. Nope, not true.
And we're not saying that necessarily you need to go to college to be successful. We're not
No.
that kind of people. We're not going to be like that. But it's also understanding that we need to be able to teach the skills and really reinforce the skills that lead to gainful employment and a better quality of life.
Because everybody should be able to be employed and be successful in their own way if they choose to do that. So
and that's also a big part of it, right? Is we're looking at these things and we're understanding that success looks different in different situations, and especially when you have cerebral palsy, it's good to celebrate the small victories. Like, hey, I got up this morning, I brushed my own teeth, I was able to, if I'm not able to cook a meal for myself, I was able to advocate and say, this is what I want to eat, this is how we're going to do it. Those are the things that we need to celebrate, and those are the things that we need to understand. I know we've talked about on this podcast before, it's a very typical human reaction and part of the human condition to kind of compare ourselves to other people.
yes,
But really understanding what success means to an individual is the biggest part of that puzzle, and understanding your own diagnosis and
yeah,
understanding what that looks like in your everyday functioning life. So I don't know how else to put that. And
yeah.
also with that is kind of destigmatizing the negativity around mental health and understanding that these are natural things that we deal with, and validating those feelings and trying not to brush them under the rug. So if we can do that and help the able-bodied world understand that we, much like a lot of the able-bodied world, deal with a lot of mental health issues, and being able to destigmatize that and validate our feelings and being able to express those without
feeling like
yeah
we're
without feeling lost. And it's very difficult to do. I could not think of words, but
yeah, I got you.
We get into those head spaces, right, where we tend to spiral. And the way that you can combat that, and the way that I've combated that through my life, and Tanner, you may have dealt with this differently, is there's a lot of things that we talk about with radical acceptance, accepting the fact that it happened and it cannot change.
Yeah,
So we're going to make the most of that. And being able to control the things that we can control. We can't control the fact that our brains lost oxygen and we were born with cerebral palsy. But what we can control is we can control how people see us. We can write and dictate our own narratives.
Yep, and I think we just need to be grateful for what we can do, because it's we've come this far, and don't let yourself get down and say, I can't do this, because I mean, if you've gotten this far, you sure can.
And it's hard too when you turn 26 and you don't have insurance, and then you kind of lose that stability of those doctors that you had in your adolescent years and in your teen years. That
Yes, but
we,
thankfully, some of us, if you have if you have access to it, you can stay on your parents' insurance.
uh,
If you need to. So
and that's important too, is be able to use those resources. And we talk ad nauseum about that, that there are those resources out there, and sometimes they're hiding in plain sight.
yeah, you may have to search for them, but they're out there.
Yeah, and that's part of what we do as an organization, as well as help our membership understand what those resources are and what they do and how they can help. But you can't help those who won't help themselves. That was something that my mom always said. So, and part of helping yourself is being able to understand what you need and being able to articulate that, whether you're verbal or not.
Yeah.
So that's important as well. And I know, Tanner, you've worked really hard on all of this as well, and you've really come out of your shell here in the last couple of months and becoming that kind of leader and that voice that I knew that I saw in you, that I don't think you necessarily saw in yourself.
Yeah.
But and I'm, again, not trying to toot my own flugelhorn, but I really am comfortable where I'm at, and I know where my feet are. That's something that um, a basketball coach of mine always used to say. You have to understand where your feet are before you can walk, or
Yep.
before you can move forward. So if you know where your feet are and you're grounded in that, then you know that only fools are satisfied. But thank you, Billy Joel, for that. But we really, it's a never ending battle with what we deal with on a daily basis. So I
Yeah, and we try to help members with that too, because they often are like, what do I do? And we don't have all the answers, but we try to help them as
yeah,
best we can.
we don't have all the answers, but as a collective, we do have a wealth of knowledge, and we have a lot of, between, the 110 of us, we've had a lot of life experience. So we really have to call upon that at times, and understand what that means, and how our own personal life experiences can help somebody else. And that's one of the joys of getting to do this podcast with so many people and so many different perspectives.
Exactly.
So, and if you want to help us in that mission, we're going to go in a shameless plug here. So we just opened an order form for new merch that we have. We have t-shirts and hoodies and crew neck sweatshirts for sale. The link will be in the description of this video. If you have any questions about those order forms or how to do that, either leave a comment or you can contact us directly. Our email is NAACPA chair. That's CHAIR. I misspelled that. CHAIR at gmail.com.
And I believe
So
that it's all lowercase too. So
yeah, it is all lowercase. So it's
if you're listening,
yeah.
if you're listening and can't see it, so yeah.
Yeah, so that will all be in the notes as well. So reach out for that. We will place the order on April 11. So about 38 days from when we're recording this. So, and all that money, you know, Tanner doesn't see it. I don't see it. It all goes back into helping our members and really forwarding the mission and the association as a whole. So I want to thank you, Tanner, for hopping on and doing this
Thanks.
quick little thing for me. And we will see you in the next one.
See you, everybody.